For 1,000 years, the desert had been the only road. But somewhere on the Red Sea coast, a sailor finally understood what the wind had been telling him all along, and the kingdoms of incense were about to lose the one advantage that had made them indispensable. The technological shift that would eventually unravel the overland incense kingdoms did not arrive as an invasion or a single dramatic event. It arrived quietly as knowledge, specifically knowledge of the monsoon wind system across the Indian Ocean and the Red Sea, and how to use it to sail directly between Egypt and the incense and spice coasts of Arabia and India, without ever needing to touch a single desert way station controlled by Saba, Hadramawt, Cataban, or Nabatean Petra. Greek and Roman sailors operating out of Egyptian Red Sea ports such as Berenice and Myos Hormuz had known about seasonal winds for generations, but by around the 1st century BCE and increasingly through the 1st century CE, this knowledge matured into a reliable, repeatable sailing system. Ships could depart Egypt in summer, ride the southwest monsoon across the Arabian Sea directly to the coasts of southern Arabia or even further to India, load their cargo of incense, spices, and other goods, and then return riding the reversed monsoon winds of winter, a round trip that, remarkably, could bypass the overland caravan network almost entirely. The anonymous Greco-Roman merchant's handbook, known as the Periplus of the Erythraean Sea, written around the mid-1st century CE, documents this maritime trade network in extraordinary commercial detail, listing ports, goods, and sailing conditions along the entire route from Egypt to India, a level of practical navigational knowledge that represented a direct existential threat to every kingdom whose wealth depended on controlling a land route rather than an ocean current. The consequences unfolded gradually rather than instantly, but they were severe. Roman Egypt, now firmly under direct Roman administration after Augustus's annexation in 30 BCE, became the primary beneficiary of this maritime shift, with Alexandria emerging as an enormous entrepot for goods arriving both overland and, increasingly, by sea. Each incense cargo that arrived by ship, rather than camel caravan, represented tolls, fees, and profits that had previously flowed to South Arabian kingdoms and Nabatean toll collectors, now flowing instead to Roman Egyptian administrators, Red Sea ship operators, and the merchants who financed these voyages. The overland kingdoms did not disappear overnight. Camel caravans continued to operate for centuries afterward, and certain goods and certain seasons still favored the land route. But the monopoly, the choke point advantage that had built Merib's dam and Petra's rock-cut tombs, was permanently broken. Incense could now reach Rome without ever paying a single Sabaean or Nabatean toll. Political change compounded the economic shift. In 106 CE, the Roman Emperor Trajan formally annexed the Nabatean kingdom, transforming it into the Roman province of Arabia Patria. Petra did not vanish immediately. It continued as an important regional center for some time, and camel caravan trade did not stop overnight. But its unique position as an independent toll-collecting middleman kingdom was over. It was now simply a city within the Roman administrative system, its trade revenues flowing into Roman rather than Nabatean coffers. In the south, the political landscape of Arabia Felix was also shifting. Over the centuries following the incense trade's maritime disruption, the older confederation of Saba, Hadramawt, Cataban, and Mine gradually gave way to the rising power of the Himyarite kingdom, which by the late centuries of the first millennium CE had absorbed or eclipsed most of its former rivals, eventually adopting the extended royal title, King of Saba and Djureden and Hadramawt and Yamanat, a title preserved in numerous surviving inscriptions that itself testifies to the eventual political unification of territories that had once been fiercely independent trading rivals. Himyar continued to profit from incense and other South Arabian exports, but it operated in a fundamentally altered commercial world, one where the sea route was now a permanent, unavoidable competitor rather than a distant theoretical possibility. Compounding these economic and political pressures was a slower-moving, but ultimately catastrophic infrastructural crisis, the failure of the Great Dam of Merib. The dam had required constant, expensive maintenance for centuries. Periodic breaches and repairs are documented in Sabaean and later Himyarite inscriptions stretching back hundreds of years, evidence of an irrigation system that demanded continuous political stability and resource investment to keep functioning. As the kingdom's overland trade revenues diminished due to maritime competition, and as political fragmentation and external pressures increased, the capacity to fund and organize the dam's upkeep appears to have weakened. Sometime in the mid to late 6th century CE, the dam suffered a final catastrophic breach that this time was not fully repaired. Later Arabic tradition, most famously reflected in the Quranic account of the flood of the dam and pre-Islamic poetry, treats the final collapse of the Marib Dam as a foundational historical and cultural memory. An event so significant it was remembered as marking the decline of the ancient South Arabian kingdoms and, in some traditions, prompting the migration and dispersal of South Arabian tribes northward into other parts of the peninsula. The final breach of the Marib Dam meant the loss of the irrigated agricultural base that had sustained Marib's population and administrative capacity for over 1,000 years. Without reliable agriculture, the oasis could no longer support a population and bureaucracy capable of projecting power over a caravan network that had, in any case, already lost much of its former economic importance to maritime competition. The kingdom that had once dictated terms to Assyrian tribute collectors and supplied the religious infrastructure of the Roman Empire quietly diminished into a regional power among several, its former glory increasingly a matter of memory, inscription, and legend rather than lived political and economic reality. By the early 7th century CE, on the very eve of the rise of Islam, the South Arabian Incense kingdoms as independent political entities had effectively ceased to exist in their ancient form. The region came under a complex succession of external influences, including periods of Aksumite, Ethiopian, and Sasanian Persian involvement in Yemen's political affairs during the 6th century, before being absorbed into the rapidly expanding Islamic Caliphate following the death of the Prophet Muhammad. The old temple religions centered on Al-Makka and other South Arabian deities gave way, alongside the rest of Arabia, to the new faith, and the ancient script of Musnad gradually fell out of everyday use, its inscriptions becoming silent stone rather than living record, until modern archaeology and epigraphy began the long work of deciphering them once more. And yet the legacy of the incense kingdoms did not simply vanish with their political power. The legend of the Queen of Sheba, whatever its precise historical basis, became one of the most enduring cross-cultural stories in world religious and literary history, appearing not only in the Hebrew Bible but in the Quran, in Ethiopian royal genealogical tradition through the Kabr Nagast, which credits the Queen of Sheba and Solomon with founding the Ethiopian royal line through their son Menelik, and in centuries of later art, literature, and music across 3 continents. Petra's rock-cut monuments, buried and largely forgotten by the wider world for centuries after the decline of its trade wealth, would eventually be rediscovered by the Swiss explorer Johann Ludwig Burckhardt in 1812, sparking a modern fascination that continues to this day, culminating in its status as one of the most visited and celebrated archaeological sites on Earth. And the Marib Dam itself, though its ancient ruins remain, has entered modern memory as a powerful symbol. Invoked in the 20th century when a new dam was constructed near the same site, deliberately named in tribute to its ancient predecessor, an acknowledgement that the ambition to tame the desert's water first demonstrated by Sabaean engineers nearly 3,000 years ago still resonates as a foundational achievement of pre-Islamic Arabian civilization. What remains, when we step back from the individual kingdoms, dams, and caravans, is a striking historical lesson. For nearly 1,000 years, some of the wealthiest, most architecturally accomplished, and most diplomatically consequential states in the ancient world built their entire civilization not on conquering fertile land, nor on military expansion, but on controlling access to a fragrant resin that grew on a handful of unremarkable, thorny trees in one of the most remote corners of the ancient world. Saba's temple priests, Hadramawt's harvesters, Ma'in's merchant diplomats, Kataban's border fortresses, and Nabataea's rock-carved toll booths together built an economic system so lucrative it shaped the religious life of Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, and ultimately Rome itself, until a change in sailing technique, a shift in imperial administration, and finally, the failure of a single ancient dam, proved that even the most durable monopoly on Earth can be undone once the world finds another way. Around it, the kingdom that controlled incense did not fall to an invading army. It fell slowly and almost imperceptibly to the wind, and to the sea that the wind at last made navigable. 3 kingdoms of stone and 1 kingdom of rock-cut tombs. 1 dam, built to defy the desert, and 1 wind, finally understood, that defied the dam's builders in return. For 1,000 years, whoever controlled the road controlled the world's fragrance, and, through it, no small share of the ancient world's religious and political life. When the sea replaced the sand, Saba, Hadramawt, Cataban, Mayan, and Nabatean Petra did not fall to swords. They fell to a current no army could fight. What remains today, carved pillars in Yemen's highlands, rose-red facades in Jordan's canyons, a single word, Sheba, still spoken in 3 religious traditions, is the quiet, enduring proof that empires built on scarcity leave behind not just ruins, but legends that outlast every empire that came looking for their gold.